In this video, we're going to cover Object Component Mode. Object Component Mode allows you to manipulate vertices, faces, and edges, as well as a few other options. And this is where a more direct object manipulation comes in. Majority of your time when you are modeling, you'll be using various component modes to change the shape of your object. You'll be manipulating vertices, edges, and faces. Now, this is video number 6 out of 17 from Maya Beginner series and from module 1 of Maya Foundation Home Study course. And this first module of 17 videos I've released for free so you can begin to learn Maya and begin using it. There are 2 more modules in the course. Module 2 that will show you how to model, and Module 3 will show you how to UV. And both are going to be inside the complete Maya Foundation Home Study course. And now let's continue with Maya Beginner series. So let me go ahead and create a simple cube. I'm going to use the poly modeling shelf. And let's go ahead and hit F to frame our view on the object. And to get access to the component modes, select the mesh. Then you simply right click, hold to get access to a context sensitive menu. And you'll have access to change to a different component mode. So by default, it'll be set to object mode. This is what we are in right now. Right click, hold. And then you can switch over to a vertex component mode. This will allow you to select vertices. These points on corners. These are the vertices. If you right click hold, you can switch over to edges. This will allow you to select edges of an object. And then if you right click hold, you can switch over to faces. This will allow you to select faces of an object. And then you can right click hold and switch over to back to object mode. Now, these 4 component modes are your primary go-to for manipulating objects and modifying their shape. Right click hold, you got your object mode, your vertex, your edge, and your face. There are a few other options here. I'll cover them, but most of the time you don't use them unless you need them. And they are going to be vertex face. This will take your object and split it, almost like separate each face individually and create a space between them. Vertex face is useful for troubleshooting an object. Sometimes you may have a couple of edges laying on top of each other, maybe faces that are overlapping and something like that. Basically, this will help you to take a look at an object and see if there's any problems with it and help you track down issues. The other one is multi, which basically allow you to select your vertices, your edges, and your faces all at the same time. So if you hover over a vertex, you can select vertices. If you hover over an edge, you can select that edge and you can select the face. So it's a multiple component selection. This is a bit more harder to use than if you were to isolate for a specific component. And I don't tend to use this, but you do have an option. And I suggest to stick with a single component first to vertices, edges, or faces. And then you can try out the multi, but I don't tend to use this. And then one more, you have UVs, which allows you to select the UVs. We're not going to be covering UVs for a while, so we're not going to be using this. And back to object is what we've been using and working with our objects. Back to object level. There are shortcut keys to switch between all of those. So instead of using the context sensitive menu for this, for the object, if you press F8, this will give you object selection. F9 is going to be your vertices. F10 will be your edges. F11 will be your faces, and F12 will be your UVs. I don't use these shortcuts, and most of the time I right click hold and switch over to one of these component level modes instead. Now, to manipulate and change things at a component level, you simply switch over. So let's just go to a vertex component level. At a vertex component level, you can select vertices. So by left clicking on one vertex, my vertex is selected. And then you can use the W, E, R for scale or for move, rotate, scale tool to manipulate those components. So right now I am at a selection level while working inside a vertex component mode. So if I hit W, my selected vertex will have a move gizmo appear. And I can take that vertex and I can move along a single axis, just like we did for the object, but now we're working at a component level. So I can move those. I can select multiple vertices. So I can left click, drag for my marquee selection. I can select multiple vertices. I can select, of course, more by left clicking and dragging to select more. And then I can take those vertices and modify them. Move them. I can move them, of course, on X, Y, Z. But again, usually you'll stick with a single axis, either X, Y, or Z individually. If you don't want to use a marquee selection, you can just left click to remove your selection at the moment. So everything, all your vertices or other components will be deselected. And then you can left click on one vertex, hold Shift and left click to add to a selection. Or you can use Shift to remove from a selection, just like we did for the objects. You can also hold down Control, and Control will just remove from a selection. So the same selection tools that we used for objects will also work for your component level or component mode selections. Now let me switch over to edges. Edges, if you select one edge, you can modify that edge. Just dragging it up and down on a specific single axis. You can select, of course, multiple edges for you to manipulate. And you can do the same thing with faces. Right click, hold, switch over to a face, select a single face or multiple faces and manipulate that and change the shape of the object. So this component mode level selection and magnification is going to be really your go-to whenever we start modeling things and changing the shape of your mesh. Now I've only used so far just the move tool, but let me switch over. I can select any component level and I can switch over to rotate. This will allow me to rotate that component, that selected face. I can switch over to scale. I can scale. I can switch over to move. I can modify this. I can, of course, switch over to vertices. I can do the same thing. I can scale those verts. I can rotate them. I can move them. So you can see how quickly you can begin to modify just the initial primitive shape by switching over to the component mode. So your component mode selection for vertices, faces, and edges will become very important and something you'll be using quite a lot. In the next video, we're going to cover axis orientation or tool settings for move, rotate, and scale. Something that's often not talked about, but something you absolutely need to know about and how to use.